the two currently most powerful portable computers that you can get, the ASUS Zephyrus G14 and the M1 MacBook Pro 13. These two machines are small, well-priced, very versatile, and are both fantastic products in their own right. But, I don't know about you, but I can only use one computer at a time, right? So if you were me, which of these computers should you use one computer at a time? That makes sense. Let's find out. Ooh, MacBook slams better. The Zephyrus didn't even slam all the way. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Look at that, didn't even close all of the way. I don't even know what that means. I would like to start this video off by thanking all of you for commenting on my videos. I figured the MacBook Air comparison would be the best way to see how the G14 stacks up to the new Apple MacBooks. But I've received enough questions about the MacBook Pro 13, and that's why we're here today. I do make a lot of my content decisions based off what you all would like to see, so make sure to comment below on what else you'd like to see, and follow me on Twitter to see what else is happening with the channel, basically live. Now, I can't promise to buy every laptop or piece of technology that everybody wants to see, but I do my best to get what seems to be the most popular option and what everybody would like to see here on the channel, so thanks again. When it comes to these two computers, these are what I consider to be the absolute best options for those that need a computer to be both a working from home / productivity office machine and also a travel, or I guess not much traveling is happening now, a not sitting at one specific desk option. Each of these are incredibly powerful, and if you prefer a specific operating system than another, well then video over. Video over, because these two are at the absolute peak of their mountain for each of their own mountains. They're separate mountains of technology. Let's quickly touch on the specs and pricing for these two before we delve into what they can actually do. We gotta build the foundation of knowledge first. You don't understand everything if you don't understand what you're starting with. The ASUS Zephyrus G14, the model I have today at least, comes in at $1,499. This comes with the Ryzen 5900HS 8-core processor, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, a 1 terabyte solid-state drive, and the NVIDIA 3060 graphics card. On the other hand, the M1 MacBook Pro 13, that base model, comes in at $1,299, and for that price, you'll get the 8-core M1 processor, 8 gigabytes of unified memory, that's what Apple calls RAM, a 256 gigabyte solid-state drive, and an 8-core integrated graphics unit. If we were to spec out the MacBook Pro 13 to be as best a match as possible to the G14, that would run us $1,899 to get that M1 with 16 gigabytes of unified memory and a 1 terabyte solid-state drive. Okay, I'm gonna leverage one main criticism at Apple today, and it's their memory and storage pricings. It is definitely on the premium side. They do have fantastic base model machines, but oof, that memory price, it hurts. Now that we know how much each of these could potentially cost us, how do they really compare to each other? Let's start off with performance. Now, a quick note, these computers should not be as powerful as they are for the size of their chassis. It's really almost like science fiction levels of power. I remember, dating myself a little bit, I remember when netbooks came out and I was so amazed that a fully functioning computer could be in such a teeny tiny little machine. While these are just a little bit bigger and they have almost full desktop power in their Ultrabook bodies. It's crazy. If we quickly bring up Cinebench R23, which is one of the benchmarks that I like to check, you'll see that the G14 is absolutely the more powerful of the two options. In multi-core performance, it's not even close. It's not even close. This is like a multi-core monster of an Ultrabook. And in single-core performance, it's closer, but, and yes, here comes the Apple fanboy talking, because the M1 is built on a different kind of operating system, and it uses its specs in different ways, and it draws an awful lot less power than the G14, and that'll give us a little bit better battery life, which we'll talk about here in a second. If a program is optimized for use on the Apple Silicon, it works much better than any of those graphs really show. But it's hard to quantify because it's different for the different programs, and each software developer takes a little bit of a different approach to each piece of software. So it's like apples on an orange system made by grapes. I know that sounds like a cop-out, and Okay, yeah, maybe it is. But in ways that matter, like if you were to buy this and then use it to work or to get stuff done, both computers will feel responsive, snappy, and I don't think you'd be lacking in power on either machine. However, asterisks, if you do want to do video gaming, yes, absolutely go with the G14. It totally wipes the floor with the M1. Even my preferred method of staring at my monitor for way too long, WoW Classic, it has a client that's optimized for the M1 and it runs fine. But it's even with that optimization, it still doesn't come as close as to what the Ryzen 5900 and the NVIDIA combo does over on the Windows side. So gaming, I'd go here. And if we were to get as close as we could to an apples to apples comparison using the same piece of software, the G14 does do much better. The software we're using today is called DaVinci Resolve, which will operate smoothly on both for video editing. But where we're gonna see the difference is when we're rendering out that video. And when we render on the MacBook, we'll get roughly 30 frames per second while it's rendering, which is good. That's still fantastic for an Ultrabook. But on the ASUS, we'll get upwards of 60 frames per second. Both are impressive, but it's twice as impressive on the G14. But while the Zephyrus seems to totally win in the performance category, like we said, it's a little more nuanced than just numbers. During the past year, wow. It just hit me as I typed that and then I read it here. Whoa, wow. The past year of working from home, my computer has had a pretty easy time of having access to a wall outlet. Even though I personally move around my house a lot during the day, I'm never that far away from just being able to plug it into the wall. So your mileage may vary on how important battery life on a laptop and a computer actually is. However, personally, I'm starting to spend a little bit of my time in my office, and it is starting to matter to me a little more how my computer functions or operates when it's got to carry its own weight for keeping itself on. I mean, it can't charge itself. Figure out, you layabouts, start figuring out how to charge yourselves, and then we'll talk about fancy science fiction technology. While the ASUS wins in raw power output, the Mac really wins if you aren't going to be able to so easily find an outlet. This is for a couple of reasons. One, the MacBook has 20 hours of battery life. Let me say that again. 20 hours of battery life. Nothing else in the market comes anywhere near that metric. The only thing that comes close is the MacBook Air. If it's not an M1 MacBook, nothing's gonna touch this. The second reason, while on that 20 hours of battery life, the MacBook will have the same power as it does when it is connected to an outlet. So if the power is enough for you connected, you'll be perfectly fine because you could get almost 3 whole days of work out of this computer, which is still, we've been banging on that drum since this computer was released. It hasn't stopped being amazing. The G14 will suffer some performance loss when not connected to power, but it's not as dire as on other Windows machines. This also suffers worse when it comes to battery life. Now on the ASUS website, it reports that this can get up to 12.5 hours of battery life. Okay, sure, a gaming laptop that gets 12.5 hours of battery life. But that is enough to clear my hurdle of 8 hours. We're gonna charge everything at the end of the day anyway, so as long as a computer can last 1 business day, I'll give it a check mark. Look here, here's the G14's check mark right here. Ding! Plus something that I wanna note in thermal performance is they both work well. Both of these work well and I have not yet had an issue with either, but when we talk like thermal performance usability wise, the MacBook comes out on top again. While yes, both computers are properly thermally managed and both have an active cooling system, the M1 Max cooling system is very quiet. The only time I ever hear the fans on this computer are when I'm playing WoW from my bed, and my wife thinks I'm doing work, but I'm actually playing World of Warcraft. Hopefully she's not watching right now. But when I'm sitting on my bed and I've got the laptop sitting on my blanket, which is literally, that is the worst place in your house to set a computer. Well, I guess besides in the oven, if the oven is on. In regular, normal life, setting your laptop on top of a blanket when you're in bed is worse because you totally mess up its airflow. And that's the only time I hear the fans on the MacBook Pro 13. When I'm in my office, it's pretty darn silent. The G14 will have some level of fan noise almost the entire time you are using it. And definitely if you are using it for anything coming close to a power task. Gaming, video editing, etc. It's not bad as far as Windows machines go, and I know that's my go-to line for basically every Windows laptop, but it's still a true statement. It's not bad, but much like battery life, nothing comes close to the M1s for silent operation. And once you get used to these, it's really It's really hard to go back to a noisy fanned computer. So how do these computers compare for portability? Well, both are pretty similarly sized, which in my opinion is even more impressive for the ASUS because it's just like a little bit bigger, but has a much more powerful processor, a much more powerful graphics card, usable I/O, again, more on the usable I/O later. There's just so much packed into here, and it's not all that much bigger. If we look at it from the perspective of portability is how well the computer will work when not in your specific office or at your home office, the G14 really comes out on top. It's got actually useful ports built into it, so if you are at a client's office and you need to project something, there's a handy full HDMI output, plus several USB-A and USB-C plugs. The M1 MacBook Pro only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. Yes, I do actually like Thunderbolt 3. It is incredibly powerful and versatile. It will, though, mean that you'll need to carry around dongles or other attachments to get the same functionality when not in your home court. If we are talking about setting up a home office, I would say they are both really close. Personally, though, I would give the edge to the Thunderbolt 3 ports in the MacBook. It's really nice when you get home and you place the laptop down in your stand or your dock, and you only need to plug in one cable to open up the full power of a desk setup. Seriously, think about it. With one cable, you can plug in a keyboard, a hard drive, a monitor, mouse, SD card, all sorts of stuff. And yes, that makes this one little port incredibly versatile. If you wanted to do the same thing with the G14, you would need a few extra steps, a few extra cables. Not some overwhelming steps, but these computers are both so good. It's gonna come down to some very specific differences that make the determining factor for you. And while we are talking about physical things on the computer, how do the two stack up from the physical perspective? Well, like we said, both are surprisingly small. Either will feel like they are not there when placed inside of a backpack or a briefcase. When it comes to the chassis, the Apple is made out of a very nice aluminum. It looks nice, it feels high quality, and it is kind of boring. It's been the same design for the last few years. The G14 is made out of some combination of magnesium and aluminum, and it also feels amazing. I don't know what it is about this laptop, but I just really like holding it. And that I know that's not really how you're supposed to use laptops, but I love it. Like here we are. Like this is my favorite computer, just to be like, check it out, world. When it comes to typing, both have fantastic keyboards, and yes, typing is something that I do more than any other thing in both my personal and my professional life. Here's where things get interesting. While I considered it more of a draw when I put the G14 up against I'm pointing at the MacBook Air. When I put the G14 up against the MacBook Air, I'm gonna say that the G14 wins here in the typing test. And that's for one reason. When you open the lid of the laptop, check it out. When you open the lid of this laptop, it raises the body up and gives it sort of a wedge shape. If you're going to be typing for long periods of time, this is super comfortable and feels incredible. The M1 MacBook Pro, unlike the MacBook Air, is not angled at all. You'll see that it's all one straight line, and it has a pretty aggressive lip to the body, leading to some minor discomfort if you are using this to type your next script or your next way too long email. Like doing this for long periods of time, especially if you're not directly, if you're not perfectly aligned on a desk, you will get some pressure right here on your forearm. And it's not a deal breaker, but it's noticeable, and it's noticeable enough to give the G14 the edge here. Even though, while I really like typing on this thing, I wish they'd used higher quality feeling materials on their keycaps. And I don't care how much the keycaps actually cost or what they're made of. I just wish they were made of something different that didn't feel as cheap right here. And let's all pause for a second, because I don't know the last time an Apple computer lost a typing test in an everyday dad video. So hats off to ASUS. Hats off. Oh, my hair's gross. So hats off to ASUS for making something really remarkable here. The trackpad immediately swings back to the MacBook. Mac is the undisputed ruler of the trackpad world. One additional note before we move away from the physical bodies, you can also open up the G14 if you do want to do a little bit of upgrading. You can swap out the internal M.2 SSD, and you can replace one of the two 8GB RAM chips. The other one is soldered to the motherboard, and I do wish that we could do some kind of upgrading in the same way on the Apple machine. For the displays, this will come down almost exactly like the MacBook Air video. The only major difference between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro is the MacBook Pro can go up to 500 nits of brightness. So again, the MacBook will have the better looking Retina panel, but the G14 has that much faster refresh rate option. And that again is very important if you are going to be playing lots of video games on this. Oh, and while we've complained for years about the MacBook Pro's 720p webcam, At least it has one, because the G14 doesn't, which is that's such a weird thing to say about a computer. Like, it still weirds me out that this thing does not have a webcam. But at the end of the day, so what? Which of these two shouldn't be as powerful as they are, but dang, they're actually powerful laptops, should you actually get? Tired after saying that now. Well, this is kind of awkward for me. This is kind of awkward because while I'm a huge fan of the MacBook, unless you specifically need a certain piece of Apple-only software, like Final Cut Pro, or you need that incredibly long battery life, it's kind of hard to recommend the M1 MacBook Pro over the G14. You have to spend almost $400 more to get the same level of storage, like the same level of specs between them, and even then, you'll still be missing out on some very nice power and I/O advantages. If you are strictly an office worker and will only be doing spreadsheets, PowerPoints, Teams meetings, etc., I would recommend the MacBook Pro. It will do better in that environment because of the battery life and because it actually has a web camera where the G14 would need to be supplemented for that. But if you are looking for an all-in-one tool for both work, but also for some personal gaming and video editing in your downtime, I would recommend the G14. You can always buy a web camera with the savings between the machines and still come out way on top. Look, neither of these are bad. That's what's crazy about these new ASUS computers. They are really the Windows machines that are worth considering in early 21. AMD has made this race interesting, and either of these could work for whatever your personal needs are, so long as your software will run on either of them. And if you like this video and you are interested in a little more in-depth look at the ASUS Zephyrus G14, you can find my 1 week later video by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.